I refused to let my estranged father meet my daughter, but then shockingly found out my mom had been hiding his attempts to reconnect for years. I'm Emma, 28F, and I've been estranged from my father, Nathan, 55M, for the past 7 years. Growing up, my relationship with my dad was always strained. He was a workaholic who prioritized his career over his family. My mom, Andrea, 53F, raised me mostly on her own while my dad was always at the office or on business trips. When I was 15, my parents got divorced. My mom told me it was because my dad had been having an affair with his secretary for years. I was devastated but not surprised. My dad had always been distant, and now I knew why. After the divorce, he moved out and I stayed with my mom. He would sometimes call or try to arrange visits, but I was too angry and hurt to want anything to do with him. Throughout my teenage years and early 20s, my dad made half-hearted attempts to reconnect. He'd send birthday cards with checks or try to schedule lunches, but I always declined. I couldn't forgive him for betraying our family and being an absent father for so long. When I was 21, I met my now husband, Alex, 30M. We dated for a few years before getting married when I was 25. During this time, my dad tried to reach out more frequently. He said he wanted to walk me down the aisle at my wedding. I refused and told him he wasn't invited. My mom's brother, Uncle Jack, 50M, walked me down the aisle instead. After the wedding, my dad kept trying to contact me. He'd send emails and leave voicemails saying he wanted to make amends and be part of my life again. I ignored all of his attempts. I had built a life without him and didn't see the need to let him back in just because he was feeling guilty. Last year, I found out I was pregnant. Alex and I were overjoyed. We decided not to announce it publicly until after the baby was born. Only our immediate family and close friends knew. My mom was ecstatic about becoming a grandmother and was incredibly supportive throughout my pregnancy. Our daughter, Becca, was born 3 months ago. She's the light of our lives and has brought so much joy to our family. A few weeks after she was born, we posted a photo of her on social media to announce her arrival to our extended family and friends. That's when the drama started. My dad must have seen the post because he immediately started bombarding me with messages. He congratulated me on becoming a mother and said he was thrilled to be a grandfather. He begged me to let him meet Becca, saying he wanted to be involved in her life even if I didn't want him in mine. I was furious. After years of being an absent father, he thought he had the right to be a grandfather? I ignored his messages at first, but he kept persisting. He even reached out to Alex on social media, pleading with him to convince me to allow a meeting. Finally, I snapped and sent my dad a long, angry email. I told him he had no right to call himself a grandfather when he'd failed so miserably at being a father. I said Becca already had 2 loving grandparents, my mom and Alex's dad. Alex's mom passed away when he was young, and didn't need a third who would likely disappoint her just like he disappointed me. I told him to stop contacting me and my family or I'd consider getting a restraining order. My dad responded with a lengthy email of his own. He apologized for his past mistakes and said he'd spent years in therapy working on himself. He claimed he was a changed man and wanted a chance to prove it. He said he understood my anger but hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive him and allow him to be part of Becca's life. I showed the email to Alex, and we discussed it at length. Alex thinks I should at least consider giving my dad a chance, saying people can change and Becca might benefit from having another grandparent in her life. But I'm not convinced. I don't trust my dad not to let Becca down the same way he let me down. My mom thinks I'm doing the right thing by keeping my dad away. She says he doesn't deserve to be in Becca's life after how he treated our family. Uncle Jack agrees with my mom and says I shouldn't feel guilty for protecting my daughter from potential disappointment. I'm torn. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh and denying Becca a relationship with her grandfather. But a bigger part of me is scared of letting my dad back into our lives only for him to hurt us again. So, Reddit, Ida for refusing to let my estranged father meet my daughter? Update 1. Thank you all for your comments and insights on my original post. I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past few weeks, and I wanted to give you an update on the situation with my dad. After reading your responses and talking it over more with Alex, I decided to take a small step towards potentially reconnecting with my dad. I sent him an email saying I was willing to have a phone call with him to discuss things further. I made it clear that this didn't mean I was agreeing to let him meet Becca, just that I was open to hearing him out. We had the phone call last week, and it was intense. My dad started by apologizing again for being an absent father and for the affair that broke up our family. He said he's been in therapy for years working on his issues and trying to become a better person. He admitted that he'd been selfish and work-obsessed when I was growing up, and that he regretted missing out on so much of my life. I listened to what he had to say, but I also voiced all the hurt and anger I've been carrying for years. I told him how much it hurt to have a father who was never there, and how betrayed I felt when I found out about his affair. I explained that I didn't trust him not to hurt Becca the same way he hurt me. My dad listened to everything I said without getting defensive. He acknowledged my feelings and said he understood why I felt the way I did. He told me that becoming a grandfather had made him realize how much he'd messed up as a father, and that he wanted a chance to do better with Becca. During our conversation, my dad revealed something that shocked me. He said that he'd actually tried to reach out to me much more frequently over the years than I'd realized. Apparently, he'd been sending letters, emails, and trying to call regularly, but I never received most of them. He asked if I'd changed my contact information at some point. That's when I remembered, when I went to college, I got a new email address and phone number. I had given the new information to my mom and close family members, but not to my dad. I realized that many of his attempts to contact me over the years might have gone to my old, unused email and phone number. This revelation made me pause and reconsider things. Had I misjudged how much my dad had been trying to reconnect? Was I holding on to anger based on an incomplete picture of the situation? After the call, I talked to my mom about what my dad had said. To my surprise, she confirmed that he had indeed been trying to reach out more often than I'd known. She admitted that she might have forgotten to pass along some of his messages over the years, saying she was trying to protect me from getting hurt again. I was stunned. I felt betrayed by my mom for withholding this information from me. I understood that she was trying to protect me, but I felt like she'd taken away my ability to make an informed decision about my relationship with my dad. Now, I'm more confused than ever. On one hand, knowing that my dad had been making more of an effort to reconnect than I'd realized makes me feel slightly more open to the idea of letting him back into my life. On the other hand, I'm angry at my mom for interfering and I'm not sure how to process that. Alex thinks I should consider meeting my dad in person, maybe in a public place without Becca, to see how it goes. He says that regardless of what happened in the past, people can change and that it might be worth giving my dad a chance to prove he's different now. Uncle Jack, who I've always been close to, surprised me by agreeing with Alex. He said that while he understood my mom's protective instincts, she shouldn't have kept that information from me. He thinks I should at least meet with my dad once before making a final decision about Becca. I'm torn about what to do next. Part of me wants to give my dad a chance, especially now that I know he's been trying harder to reconnect than I realized. But another part of me is still scared of getting hurt again or of letting Becca down if things don't work out. I'm also struggling with my feelings towards my mom. I understand she thought she was protecting me, but I feel like she overstepped by making that decision for me. I'm not sure how to address this with her or how it will affect our relationship going forward. For now, I've told my dad I need some time to think things over. I haven't made any promises about meeting in person or letting him meet Becca, but I haven't completely shut down the possibility either. I'd appreciate any advice on how to proceed from here. Should I give my dad a chance to prove he's changed? How do I deal with my feelings of betrayal towards my mom? And most importantly, how do I make sure I'm doing what's best for Becca in all of this? Update 2. I want to thank everyone again for their advice and support. A lot has happened since my last update, and I wanted to share the latest developments with you all. After much consideration, I decided to meet with my dad in person. We arranged to meet at a cafe near my house. Alex offered to come with me for support, but I felt like this was something I needed to do on my own. The meeting was uncomfortable, to say the least. Seeing my dad in person after so many years was strange. He looked older than I remembered, with more gray in his hair and lines on his face. We sat down, and at first, neither of us knew what to say. Eventually, we started talking. My dad apologized again for everything that had happened in the past. He told me more about the therapy he'd been doing and the changes he'd made in his life. He said he'd realized how much his workaholic tendencies and selfishness had cost him, and that he'd been working hard to become a better person. I listened to what he had to say, but I also made it clear that I wasn't ready to just forgive and forget. I told him about all the times I'd needed a father and he wasn't there. I explained how his absence and the affair had affected me, and how I was still dealing with trust issues because of it. During our conversation, my dad revealed something that caught me off guard. He told me that the reason he'd thrown himself into work so much when I was young was because he'd been dealing with severe depression. He said he felt like a failure as a husband and father, and work had been his way of escaping those feelings. He admitted that the affair had been a misguided attempt to feel better about himself. I was shocked by this revelation. My dad had never talked about his mental health before. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it did help me understand it a little better. As we were talking, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. He was checking in to make sure everything was okay. Seeing Alex's name pop up on my phone seemed to make my dad sad. He commented that he wished he could have been there for my wedding and to see Becca being born. That's when I made a decision. I showed my dad a recent picture of Becca on my phone. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he commented on how much she looked like me when I was a baby. Seeing his reaction, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness for the grandfather-granddaughter relationship that might have been, anger at the circumstances that led us here, and a tiny spark of hope that maybe things could be different going forward. After our meeting, I went home and talked things over with Alex. We decided that we would allow my dad to meet Becca, but with strict conditions. The first meeting would be at our house, with both Alex and me present the entire time. It would be a short visit, and we made it clear that this didn't mean my dad automatically had grandfather rights or regular access to Becca. We set up the meeting for the following weekend. My dad arrived right on time, looking nervous but excited. When we introduced him to Becca, his eyes filled with tears. He held her carefully, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Watching my dad with Becca was surreal. Part of me was happy to see them together, but another part was angry that he seemed to care so much about being a grandfather when he'd been such an absent father. It was a complex mix of emotions that I'm still trying to sort through. After the visit, Alex and I talked about how it went. We both agreed that my dad had behaved appropriately and seemed genuinely moved by meeting Becca. We decided we would allow occasional visits going forward, always supervised and on our terms. However, this decision has caused some tension with my mom. When I told her about letting my dad meet Becca, she was upset. She said she couldn't believe I was letting him back into our lives after everything he'd done. We had a big argument about it, with her accusing me of forgetting all the pain he'd caused and me accusing her of trying to control my decisions again. Now, I'm in a difficult position. I'm cautiously moving forward with allowing my dad limited contact with Becca, but it's causing problems with my mom. Uncle Jack is trying to mediate between us, but it's a tense situation. I'm not sure what the right answer is here. Am I making a mistake by giving my dad this chance? How do I balance my dad's desire to be a grandfather with my mom's feelings and my own complicated emotions? And most importantly, how do I make sure all of this doesn't negatively impact Becca as she grows up? Any advice would be appreciated as I try to navigate this complicated family situation. Update 3: It's been a while since my last update, and a lot has happened. I wanted to share the latest developments with you all. Over the past few months, we've been allowing my dad to have supervised visits with Becca about once a month. These visits have gone relatively well. My dad has been respectful of our boundaries and seems to genuinely enjoy spending time with Becca. He brings her small gifts, reads to her, and seems to be trying his best to be a good grandfather. However, the situation with my mom has gotten worse. She's been increasingly upset about my dad being in Becca's life. She refuses to be around when he visits and has been making passive-aggressive comments about it whenever we talk. It's gotten to the point where our relationship is really strained. Things came to a head last month at Becca's first birthday party. We had invited both my parents, making it clear that they would need to be civil for Becca's sake. My dad agreed immediately, saying he would do whatever we asked. My mom initially agreed too, but on the day of the party, she showed up clearly upset. Throughout the party, my mom kept making snide comments whenever my dad was near Becca. She would loudly reminisce about how she raised me all alone and how some people don't deserve second chances. It was uncomfortable for everyone, and I could see my dad getting more and more upset. The breaking point came when it was time for Becca to blow out her candle. My dad was holding her, and my mom suddenly snapped. She started yelling about how he had no right to be there, how he was a terrible father who was now trying to play happy families. She accused me of betraying her by letting him back into our lives. I was mortified. Our friends and family were all watching the scene unfold. Becca started crying, scared by all the yelling. I took Becca from my dad and asked both of my parents to leave. I was shaking with anger and embarrassment. After the party, Alex and I had a long talk. We decided that we couldn't continue like this. The tension between my parents was affecting everyone, especially Becca. We realized we needed to set some firm boundaries. I called both of my parents separately the next day. I told my dad that while we appreciated his efforts, we needed to take a step back. We said we'd still allow him to see Becca occasionally, but less frequently, and that he needed to understand that he would never have the same relationship with her that my mom does. The conversation with my mom was much harder. I told her that while I understood her feelings, her behavior at the party was unacceptable. I explained that her inability to accept my decisions about my dad was damaging our relationship. I said that if she couldn't respect our choices regarding Becca, we would have to limit her time with us as well. My mom didn't take it well. She accused me of choosing my dad over her and said she couldn't believe I was punishing her for protecting me. I stood my ground, telling her that I wasn't choosing anyone over anyone else, I was choosing what I believe is best for my daughter and my family. Since then, things have been tense. My dad has respected our decision to scale back visits. He sends cards and small gifts for Becca but doesn't push for more contact. My mom, on the other hand, has been distant. She's only seen Becca once since the birthday party, and our conversations are strained. Uncle Jack has been a great support through all of this. He's been trying to mediate between my mom and me, and he's reminded me that sometimes there are no perfect solutions in family conflicts. Alex and I are focusing on Becca and on our own little family unit. We're trying to shield her from all the drama while also making sure she feels loved and supported. I still have mixed feelings about the whole situation. Part of me wonders if I made the right choice in letting my dad back into our lives, even in this limited capacity. Another part feels guilty about the rift with my mom, even though I know her behavior was unacceptable. But mostly, I'm sad. Sad that my daughter's first birthday was marred by family drama. Sad that my parents can't put aside their issues for the sake of their granddaughter. Sad that what should be a joyous time in our lives is complicated by old hurts and resentments. For now, we're taking it one day at a time. We're trying to create a stable, loving environment for Becca, free from the tension and drama of the past few months. We've decided to focus on our immediate family, Alex, Becca and me, and to limit extended family interactions until things calm down. I'm not sure what the future holds for our family relationships. I hope that with time, my mom will come to accept our decisions and that we can repair our relationship. I hope my dad continues to respect our boundaries and proves that he can be a positive presence in Becca's life. But I've learned that I can't control their actions or feelings, I can only control my own. To those who have stuck with me through this long journey, thank you for your support and advice. It's been a difficult road, but I'm hopeful that we're moving towards a more peaceful future, even if it's not the one I originally envisioned. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that family relationships are complicated. There's rarely a clear right or wrong answer, and sometimes you have to make tough choices to protect your own family unit. I'm doing my best to navigate these choppy waters, always keeping Becca's best interests at heart.